Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a book that really gets you thinking about, well, what you actually need to be happy. It's called The Happy Minimalist by Peter Lawrence.
Sounds intriguing.
It is. We're going to be exploring, the whole philosophy behind minimalism, and then we're going to look at the benefits, maybe some counter arguments, and you might be surprised at how this lifestyle could impact your own life.
Minimalism. A lot of people think, stark white walls, empty apartment, but there's a lot more to it.
I love that. Deeper layers.
Well,
So, according to Lawrence, what does a minimalist, what do they look like in everyday life?
well, he talks a lot about this concept of utility per resource, UPR.
UPR.
Okay. Yeah. Think about it like this. When was the last time you cleaned out your closet and got rid of all those clothes you never wear?
Oh, feels so good.
You just increase the UPR of your closet space.
That's a great way to put it. It's not about deprivation, but about being intentional with what we own and how we use it. But Lawrence also debunks some common misconceptions, right?
Mm.
Like the idea that minimalists are, these gloomy hermits who hoard their money.
Right. He pushes back against that it's about being cheap or stingy. He gives this great example. He talks about, instead of buying a toy his nephew might not even play with, he'd rather use those resources to maybe provide a school uniform for a child in need.
I see. It's about maximizing the impact, not just holding on to things. So why would someone even consider minimalism in the first place? What's the compelling reason to dive in?
Well, he uses this analogy of a hamster on a spinning wheel. We work and work and work, but are we actually making any meaningful progress?
Right.
He challenges us to define, what good really means in our own lives, not what society dictates.
It's easy to get caught up in keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
If you were born in 1900 and could afford anything you wanted back then, would you be happy? Right. But so many things we consider essential today didn't even exist back then.
So true. And I think he highlights how a lot of our perceived needs are really just manufactured wants.
Okay. Driven by, advertising and just all that societal pressure.
Hmm.
So what does Lawrence consider to be our true needs?
He really boils it down to the basics. Clean air and water, nutritious food, adequate shelter.
Essentials.
Everything else is secondary.
Yeah. It's not saying you have to live in a bare bones shack, right?
Okay.
But it's about being mindful of what we bring into our lives.
Yeah.
He mentions these 3 thought-provoking life planning questions from financial planner George Kinder.
He does.
Do you remember what those were?
Yeah, they're all about, imagining your life with limited time and what would you truly prioritize.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's a powerful way to clarify, what's really important.
And speaking of perspective, Lawrence shares a pretty eye-opening statistic. He says that, if you bought his book and you're not a student, you're likely in the top 2% of the wealthiest people globally.
Wow.
It really puts things into perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads into his argument about how minimalism can be, beneficial on a much broader scale.
Mm-hmm.
And he breaks it down into categories. He starts with how it can be good for the soul. He even draws a connection to Buddha.
Right.
Who found enlightenment through a life of simplicity and detachment from material possessions. Then he moves on to how minimalism can benefit society. Less disparity between the haves and have-nots, potentially a more just world. He mentions some data in the appendix, like a possible link between excessive wealth inequality and issues like crime and resentment.
Interesting.
Then there's the impact on the country as a whole. He links things like the obesity epidemic and our negative savings rate to, overconsumption. We're buying more than we need, and it's affecting our health and finances. And, of course, he doesn't shy away from the environmental benefits.
Right.
Minimalism naturally leads to reduced consumption, lighter footprint. Does he get into specific examples of American consumption habits?
Oh, yeah. He cites statistics about, how much waste the average American generates and how many resources we consume compared to other countries.
Okay.
And he points out if everyone lived like the average American, we'd need multiple Earths.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
But let's get back to a more personal level for a second. Can minimalism actually save us money?
Lawrence makes a really compelling case for that. He has this example of 2 guys, Tom and Dick. Tom embraces simplicity. Dick constantly wants the newest, shiniest things.
All right, where's this going?
He uses Dick's desire for a new HD TV, and he breaks down not just the sticker price, but, sales tax, potential for accessories, extra hours Dick has to work to afford it, future repair costs. Suddenly, that $1,000 TV looks a lot more expensive.
Right. It's amazing how many hidden costs we just overlook.
And Lawrence argues all those savings could be, invested, used to achieve financial independence.
So it's about shifting from short-term gratification to those long-term goals.
Mhm.
But it's not just about finances, right? He talks about mental and physical health too.
Absolutely. He challenges the idea that we need a lot of stuff to be happy and creative. He poses these fun thought experiments like, if you have a VCR but no TV, can you still watch your tapes?
I love that.
Or could you use something you already have as a computer desk?
It's like looking at what you have with fresh eyes.
Exactly.
So what about physical health?
Well, he talks about how the lack of modern conveniences can actually lead to more activity. Think power windows, you're getting a mini workout every time you roll them down.
Oh, that's a good point. The little things. He has that real world example too, right? About the Taos Pueblo people.
Yes. He talks about how they use ladders to access their homes, and as a result, they're incredibly fit.
Wow. Just from the constant climbing.
Right.
He also mentions potential health risks, right? Like from chemicals in furniture.
Yeah.
Less stuff, less exposure.
It's all about a more conscious living environment.
All right, so we've got our souls, society, the country, the environment, our wallets, our mental and physical health. Pretty far-reaching. But before we jump into counter-arguments, tell me about Lawrence's personal minimalist lifestyle.
Well, get ready. It's definitely unconventional.
I've heard he doesn't even own a bed.
He doesn't. He prefers a sleeping bag, more comfortable and practical for him. And he's super resourceful with technology. His laptop is his TV. He connects a USB TV tuner and, wait for it, his VCR.
He still have a VCR.
Wow, he really believes in using what he has. No need to constantly upgrade. He ditched cable and satellite TV ages ago, simple antenna, streaming services, and furniture. Minimalist. No dining table, computer desk, or even a sofa.
What does he use?
Foldable chairs, ironing board as a desk.
That's impressive. He's really streamlined his life. And you mentioned before how energy conscious he is, right?
Well, yeah, big on slaying energy vampires. Unplugging devices, turning off lights. His daily electricity use is rarely over 3 kilowatts.
That's amazing. I probably use that just charging my phone. What about bills and paperwork? All paperless.
He tries his best. Big advocate for going paperless, e-statements, digitizing everything. He even keeps it all in one backpack, ready to go at any moment.
Prepared for anything. Sounds like he's really mastered simplifying things.
Yeah.
But I bet not everyone's convinced.
Let's talk about some of the counter-arguments people might raise about this lifestyle. The big one. It's the economy, stupid. What happens if everyone stops buying things?
Right, that's a valid concern, and he addresses it head on. He acknowledges consumer spending is a big part of the economy, but he points out it's not the only factor.
So what are the alternatives? What else makes a healthy economy?
Things like government spending on, essential infrastructure, business investments that boost productivity, and a focus on increasing exports.
So not stopping economic activity altogether, but maybe changing what we focus on. Instead of mindless consumption, a more strategic and sustainable approach.
Exactly. And he even criticizes our reliance on GNP, gross national product, as the only way we measure a nation's well-being.
Yeah, I've always felt like it doesn't tell the whole story. Right. And he quotes Robert Kennedy's speech where he says GNP doesn't account for things like the health of our children, the quality of their education, the strength of our relationships, the beauty of our world.
Powerful stuff. There's definitely more to life than just material wealth.
And he talks about alternative metrics, like green national accounting, which considers environmental costs, or gross national happiness, which puts the well-being of citizens first.
Like we're looking at a more colorful picture,
Yeah.
not just black and white. But then there's the argument that this is all for tree huggers. Like you have to be super into sustainability to be a minimalist.
He pushes back on that, saying sustainability is really about self-preservation. He uses an analogy of two men stranded on islands with limited resources. One guy uses everything up quickly, the other manages carefully.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The guy who wasted everything, he dies. The other one survives. It's like how we need to treat our planet's resources.
Yeah, I can't just consume mindlessly. Like if we keep going like this, we're going to run out.
Right. And he links it to safe withdrawal rates in financial planning. You can only take out so much from your savings every year.
So we can't be spending resources faster than the earth can replenish them.
Exactly. Like withdrawing too much from the planet's bank account. He even brings up peak oil and how it's getting harder and more expensive to get resources as they become scarce. It's not sustainable to keep consuming like we are.
This is all really eye-opening. But what about happiness? Can you really be happy with less? Aren't material possessions supposed to make us happy?
Lawrence talks about this a lot. He shares his own experiences, and he genuinely finds joy in the non-material things. The beauty of nature, connecting with people he cares about, the peace that comes from a simpler life.
I think a lot of us forget that.
Yeah. He challenges readers to remember times they were happy with fewer possessions, maybe camping, a vacation somewhere remote, just being out in nature.
You kind of reset your wants and needs when you do that.
Exactly. And he encourages people to list things they enjoy that money can't buy. Love, connection, purpose.
Okay, so we're convinced. Minimalism could make us happier. It's good for the planet. It's not going to destroy the economy. But what about that social pressure? Like, what will people think if we start living differently?
Lawrence gets that. He uses Aesop's fable about the man, the boy, and the donkey. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah. No matter what you do, someone will always have something to say.
Exactly. He encourages us to be brave, follow our own path, even if it's different. Don't let other people's opinions control your choices.
And it's not about, like, cutting off your friends and family, right?
Right. It's about being true to yourself. And you never know, you might inspire someone else to think about their own choices.
Be a leader, not a follower. But is there a danger of taking minimalism too far?
He does talk about that. He uses the example of himself neglecting exercise.
What do you mean?
He was so focused on simplifying his life that he forgot about, like, the importance of being physically active.
So it's not about depriving yourself of things that are important for your well-being.
Right. It's about making good choices, not just following rules. Welcome back to our deep dive into The Happy Minimalist. In part 1, we talked about the philosophy and all the potential benefits. Now, let's get a bit more practical.
Yeah, let's get into the how-tos.
How to actually, live this way. Lawrence has some specific tools and strategies he calls aids for a minimalist, and technology actually plays a big role.
Interesting. You'd think a minimalist would be, like, off the grid.
Well, he's all about using technology strategically to simplify. He calls his laptop his electronic filing cabinet. He's digitized almost everything: photos, notes, articles, music, you name it.
Wow, a whole library in one place.
Makes sense, right? Save space.
Definitely. And you mentioned he uses it as his entertainment center, too.
He does. He connects a USB TV tuner and his VCR.
A VCR?
Yeah.
Seriously. It seems counterintuitive to, like, hold on to old tech when everyone's obsessed with the latest gadgets.
He's all about using what he already has to the fullest. Why upgrade if it still works?
It's so true. We always want the newest, shiniest thing.
It's a trap. He's also a big advocate for public libraries.
Oh, that makes sense.
A great resource for minimalists, or anyone really. Access to tons of books, movies, music, without having to own any of it.
Talk about maximizing UPR utility per resource.
Exactly. And he even points out the due dates are a good thing. They motivate you to actually engage with what you borrow and return it. Be mindful of your time.
I like that limitations can actually make you more focused.
Right. He doesn't just talk about stuff, though. He also talks about minimizing routines.
Routines.
Like questioning things we do out of habit. Do we really need to go grocery shopping 3 times a week? Are we washing our clothes more often than necessary?
It's easy to just do things a certain way because that's how you've always done them.
And he talks about being mindful of time in general. Like, how much time are we wasting on things that don't really nourish us?
So easy to fall into those traps, especially with technology.
He even challenges the whole multitasking thing. Research shows it's not good for productivity or memory. Better to focus on one thing at a time.
Do it well. Quality over quantity.
Right. He also has some advice for people who are prone to, impulse buys. Before you buy something, he says, ask yourself, do I really need this? How long will it last? Will it outlive me, or will I outlive it?
Those are good questions to ask.
Yeah. And instead of buying new, think about repairing or repurposing what you already have.
Reduce waste, save money. I love giving new life to old things.
He also warns against the Diderot effect. You know, that tendency to upgrade everything once you get one new thing.
No, the Diderot effect, I've totally done that.
Yeah.
Like you get a new sofa and suddenly your coffee table looks terrible.
Exactly. He wants us to break free from that cycle. Be content with what we have. He even challenges readers to see how long they can go without buying anything new.
That's a tough one.
But a good exercise in mindfulness. So we've talked about minimizing possessions, routines, even time. Does he ever take things too far?
Yeah, does Lawrence ever go overboard?
He talks about indulging in extreme sports, but he's not saying everyone has to go that far.
Extreme sports in minimalism. What does that even mean?
Like, think of a really fit person. Their heart can pump the same amount of blood with fewer beats. It's about becoming more efficient, getting the most out of the least.
So he's always pushing the limits, seeing how little he can live with.
He is, but he's clear that this isn't for everyone. It's a personal journey.
Finding what works for you.
Right, what brings you joy and freedom?
This has been so practical and insightful. I feel like I have actual tools to work with now.
Good. Ready to tackle some of those counter-arguments.
Bring them on. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground philosophy benefits, even got a glimpse into Lawrence's own minimalist lifestyle. But let's talk about that elephant in the room, the economy. Would a minimalist lifestyle hurt the economy?
It's definitely a common concern. People worry that if everyone stops buying, the whole system collapses.
Right. Like, is that even realistic, everyone going minimalist?
Lawrence acknowledges that's unlikely. But even if it did happen, he says, it wouldn't be the end of the world, economically speaking. He points out that GNP, gross national product, isn't just about how much people are spending.
So there are other factors that contribute to a strong economy.
Exactly. He talks about things like government spending, but on essential things like infrastructure and business investments that help increase productivity. And then there's the whole area of exports.
So instead of just buying more and more, it's about shifting the focus, being more mindful of what we spend on.
Yeah, moving away from just mindless consumption, Lawrence actually goes a step further and critiques our reliance on GNP as the only measure of a country's well-being.
I've heard that before. Like, GNP doesn't really capture the whole picture of what makes a society successful.
Right. And he quotes Robert Kennedy, who talked about how GNP doesn't measure things like the health of our children, the quality of their education, how strong our relationships are, or the beauty of our environment.
There's definitely more to a good life than just money and stuff.
And he suggests looking at different measures like green national accounting, which includes the environmental costs of what we do, or gross national happiness, which prioritizes people's well-being, not just economic growth.
It's like seeing the whole picture in color instead of just black and white. Okay, but what about that argument that this is all just for, like, tree huggers? Do you have to care about the environment to be a minimalist?
He addresses that too. He argues that sustainability is actually about taking care of ourselves in the long run. He uses this analogy of two guys stranded on islands. They both have limited resources.
Okay, minimalist.
One guy uses everything up right away. The other guy manages carefully.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
The one who wasted everything, he dies. The other one survives. It's like how we need to approach the Earth's resources.
It makes you realize those resources aren't unlimited.
He connects this to something called safe withdrawal rates in financial planning, like how much you can take out of your savings each year without running out of money.
So we can't be using up the planet's resources faster than they can be replenished.
That's right. We have to live within our means, environmentally speaking. He even brings up peak oil and how it's getting harder and more expensive to get resources as they get scarcer. We can't just assume they'll always be there.
So we've talked about the economy, the environment. But what about happiness? Can you really be happy with less stuff?
Lawrence tackles that head on. He shares his own personal experience, and he says he finds real joy in things that aren't material possessions. The beauty of nature, his connections with people, the peace that comes from a simpler life.
It's easy to get caught up in thinking we need to buy things to be happy.
Yeah. He challenges people to think about times they were happy without a lot of stuff. Camping, vacations, just spending time in nature.
You kind of reset your priorities when you do that.
And he encourages readers to make a list of things they enjoy that money can't buy. Things like love, connection, having a purpose.
All right, so let's say we're on board. Minimalism could make us happier, it's better for the planet, and it won't wreck the economy. But what about everyone else? What will our friends and family think if we decide to simplify our lives?
He talks about that too. It's a real fear a lot of people have. He brings up that fable, Aesop's fable about the man, the boy, and the donkey.
Oh, yeah. No matter what you do, someone's going to have an opinion about it.
Exactly. He encourages us to be brave enough to do what we think is right, even if it's different. Don't let other people's opinions run your life.
It's not about cutting off your friends and family.
Right.
It's about figuring out what's important to you.
And maybe by living your own way, you might inspire someone else to think about their own choices.
Be a leader, not a follower.
Yeah.
But with all this talk about minimalism, is there a danger of taking things too far?
He does bring that up. He even uses an example of himself and how he neglected exercise for a while.
Really?
Yeah. He was so focused on simplifying his life that he forgot about the importance of staying active.
It's a good reminder that minimalism isn't about depriving yourself. It's about balance.
Right. Making choices that are good for you, not just blindly following rules.
So after this deep dive into the Happy Minimalist, what's the big takeaway?
Is take a good look at your life and your choices. Figure out what's truly important to you and make decisions that reflect those values.
It's empowering, right? We have the choice to live differently.
And remember that quote, the unexamined life is not worth living.
Well said. It's been a fascinating exploration of minimalism. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the Happy Minimalist.
And maybe you'll even be inspired to make a few changes in your own life.